I've played at hundreds of jam sessions in Chicago, Indianapolis, Denver, Seattle, and it's allowed me to play professionally in every city that I've lived. And what's more is I've helped over 50 drummers to get confident enough to go to their first jam session in the last 5 years. So today I'm going to be giving you the full roadmap that I use with my students to get them confident enough to go to their first jazz jam session and actually sit in. So this is the roadmap to get jam session ready. You're going to need soloing, comping, tunes, and you're going to need to have the right vibes, okay? So let's start with soloing. The first ability you're going to need with soloing is the ability to trade fours, okay? And what you're going to find is there's going to be times where, they play 4 bars of solo, you play 4 bars of solo. And you need to be able to get through those fours in a way that you don't get lost in them, which means that you're going to need to know the phrasing, like when does it stop and start, and how do I get through it in a way that it's not I'm just rambling, it actually makes sense, okay? So the way we do this with my students is we do something we call the ABs, okay? And it's really simple. Basically what we're doing is we are taking an A phrase, so we pick like a 1 bar phrase, something like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a B phrase, something like this, okay? And then we put them together in different combinations that add up to 4. So I could play A, right? I could play B, 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 B. Okay, but then where it starts to get interesting is when you make a form out of it, like A, B, A. That sounds more interesting. That's more musical. That's what you're going to hear famous jazz drummers like Philly Joe or Kenny Washington playing all the time. And what's going to happen is once you go through this process where you do a bunch of these A's and D's, you're going to just naturally feel like the cadence or the rhyme scheme of how to get through these fours in a way that makes sense, which is going to make you super confident when they come up. But what you're going to find is like, hey, I'm getting through these trading fours, but I'm kind of bored with my ideas. I want some ideas that are more interesting. And those ideas are what we call vocabulary. You need jazz vocabulary, okay? And the way that we get good jazz vocabulary, it's not from getting them from a book. It's not from getting them from an exercise. It's getting them from the best jazz drummers of all time. Philly Joe Jones, Max Roach, Greg Hutchinson, Elvin Jones. You need to figure out how to get your ideas from them and then put them into practice, okay? So what I do with my students is I give them 5 ideas that are from our vocabulary primer. In every single one, we listen to, okay, here's how Philly Joe played it. Here's all the subtlety. This is what makes it really, really swing and sound authentic rather than just being like some chunky paradiddle that, it just doesn't sound right, okay? So my student, Brian, he used this and he learned these 5 ideas, integrated them with the ABs, and then when he went to his first jam session, he was able to get to the trading floors just fine. That's exactly what we're looking for. Because when you have that authentic vocabulary, the other musicians are going to hear you and they're going to like trust you. They're going to be like, he or she knows what they're doing. They sound like a jazz musician. They're not just faking their way through it, okay? But there is going to be another thing that you need in order to really sound authentic. Because a lot of times we could play the exact same notes that these great jazz drummers play, but it doesn't sound right if it doesn't have the right feel, okay? So feel is one of the most important things in your jazz soloing. And basically it comes down to a couple of things. The biggest one is I hear people being very overly swung, overly skippy when they play. It sounds like this, right? It needs to be a little smoother. It needs to be a little like in the cracks, something like that. So, right, something that's somewhere between like a triplet swing and like a really straight 8th note. And that gets you the jazz feel you want. The other thing is, if you're a rock drummer, might have like a harsher touch that's not really what you want for jazz. It might be like, where jazz, we have a lighter touch. Instead of like really slamming it down, we kind of just let the stick drop. Okay? So you get something like this. Right? It's a lot smoother. It flows a lot better. Just works better for jazz. Okay? So the way that you develop those two things, that swing feel and that light touch, is by playing saxophone melodies. Okay? So people like specifically Charlie Parker, okay? The thing that's great about a saxophone melody from Charlie Parker, like Billy's Bounce, said, it has all those things in it. It has the right swing feel that's nice and connected because he's playing on a melodic instrument. And then it's not really harsh. It doesn't sound all like drummy and rudimental. It sounds smooth and jazzy. And, that's the kind of feel you want to get. And the best way to do it is by learning some of these melodies on the drums, okay? So what's going to happen is you're going to get really good at that. And then that feel is just going to sort of permeate everything you do. And that's really what makes you sound like a jazz drummer. It's kind of like I could play anything and I would sound like a jazz drummer if I play it with the right feel, okay? And so you're going to be getting through these trading fours. You're going to have vocabulary that sounds authentic and you play it in a way that feels authentic. But there's going to come a moment when the whole band stops and they look over at you and you have to play a full chorus solo, okay? This is going to be scary. And I know what you're afraid of. It's, I hope I don't get lost in the form. Or, I can play for 16 bars, but then I kind of trail off and I don't know what to do. Or I know where I am, but the band doesn't hear me. They don't know where I am in the form, okay? That's because it all comes back to one problem, okay? It's just phrasing. You need to learn phrasing. Phrasing is not like the licks you play. The licks are kind of like words if you were speaking a language. Phrasing is more like how you put the licks together in a sentence, right? It's kind of like sentence structure or syntax, right? And the way that we learn phrasing at the very beginning is by doing something that I call melody mapping, okay? So melody mapping is a technique I use with my students where you take the melody of a song, and a lot of times you can just play the melody of a song as your solo. Like a song like Now's the Time, I could just play the melody as my solo. Right? That works. I didn't get lost in the form, but it starts to feel a bit limited. And it's hard to think of the melody and think of like all your cool vocabulary adverbs. Right? So you become like this guy trying to like juggle like this and this at the same time, and it's just overwhelming. So you need a way to kind of generalize, and that's where the mapping part of melody mapping comes in. Okay, so let me give you a real example of how to use melody mapping with a tune like Now's the Time, okay? So Now's the Time, it starts with a one-bar phrase, ba-do-ba-de-bo-da. Then you repeat that one-bar phrase, ba-do-ba-de-bo-da, and then it has a longer two-bar phrase, ba-do-ba-de-bo-do-ba-de-bo-do-ba-de-bo-da. So if I take that same structure and instead of playing it with eighth notes, I play it with triplets, right? Boom. I'm playing the phrasing of the song without playing the melody explicitly. That's what melody mapping is. And if I take that same structure and I go one-bar phrase, two-bar phrase, but I fill it with jazz vocabulary instead, then it starts to sound like a real improvised jazz drum solo. Right? You can hear it has phrasing that makes sense. Nobody's getting lost in the form when I play that, but it's also creative and very flowy, okay? So really what I find with my students is that if you can master melody mapping, it's going to make it so you can get through a 12-bar solo, 16-bar solo, 32-bar solo with no problems, okay? And with that, you're going to be able to trade fours, you're going to have good vocabulary, you're going to have a good feel, and you're going to be able to get through full chorus solos, which is really all you need to be jam session ready at the end of the day. By the way, if you want personalized help with your jazz soloing, that is what I help my students with at the jazz school. Click the link in the description to reach out and apply for mentorship. Alas, soloing is not all you need to go to a jam session. You're also going to need to comp for other people's solos, okay? And that brings us to the comping section. Now, the first thing you're going to need for the comping section is you need to have a good feel. You can play all the exercises in the John Riley book and be able to have the coordination to comp anything, have all this Elvin Jones stuff that you play. But if it doesn't feel good, it just doesn't count. People are going to sense it on you the second you start playing, okay? And what I find with a lot of drummers who are trying to get ready for their first jam session is that the feel isn't driving enough. It feels kind of laid back and lazy. And what we need to do is learn how to make it forward and driving and supportive for the other members of the band, okay? The way we do this, there's two things we do. First, we listen to famous jazz drummers like Jimmy Cobb. We just listen to their feel and their drive and how it moves the band forward so that we can cop it. And what we usually find is that the thing we need to bring out in their playing is the 2+4 ride cymbal, okay? What is this? So a lot of jazz drummers, when they play, they treat every note the same, right? And if you treat every note the same, then it just doesn't have that drive. And the other thing they do is they break up the pattern every time they comp like this. Right? What we need to do is have a stable and consistent ride cymbal pattern so that we feel the drive even when we're comping, okay? So we start by accenting 2 and 4. And then you have to keep that coordination while you comp, okay? So you can't let it get distracted by your comping. And that gives you the tip. It gives you that forward-leaning edge that drives the whole band forward. That's the very first, most important. If you do nothing else, you need to make sure that your feel is dialed in, okay? But you are going to need to have something to play, right? You don't just want to play the same ride cymbal beat over and over again. So just like with soloing, we need to have comping vocabulary, okay? Where do we get our comping vocabulary? If you were paying attention in the soloing section, we get it from the greatest jazz drummers of all time. Jimmy Cobb, Tony Williams, Louis Hayes, right? We transcribe these guys. I give my guys a vocabulary primer that introduces them to, a couple licks that will get them through most jam sessions, just so they can get ready. They can have something that sounds authentic. What you need is you need stuff that has contrast between the snare drum and the bass drum, so you can have an interplay like this. And the other thing is you can't play everything flat. You need to have some subtlety in your left hand with some accents and taps, okay? So it should sound something like this. That's really how real jazz drummers play. And if you learn vocabulary without that, it's just gonna feel a little bit stale. Like I remember the first time I went through the Riley book, I just learned it all flat because I was just looking at notes on the page. But then when I listened to the recording on the Riley book, John Riley, he was putting all these accents and subtleties in there that just made it sound way more hip, and I had to just go and do the whole thing over again. So what you're gonna find, you can comp with a good feel, good vocabulary, but you're gonna get into these solos and you're like, okay, I can comp for the head of the tune, but when we get into the solos, I'm trying to sing the melody and I just get lost, right? That's when you need to be able to keep the form, okay? And my student Scott was working on this recently, right? He was playing this song Driftin'. He's like, oh, I can play along to the melody. I can sing the melody great. But then we get into the solos and what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to sing the melody. I'm trying to comp. There's a solo going on. It's too much. You need another way to feel the structure of the form. So what me and Scott worked on is we worked on release points, okay? So a release point it's basically when you play like a little mini crash at the beginning or the end of a phrase, okay? So it sounds something like this, right? Or like this. Very simple, but it's where you put them. So what we did with Scott is we did a melody map of Driftin', and all the important phrase points, we played a really subtle crash, just like this. And what that did, it sounded really boring because we were just playing the releases. But what it did is later on when I said, okay, man, just put on the track and just jam with it. Then he was able to know where he was in the form because the release points, they create like a muscle memory so that you have a structure of the tune that doesn't depend on the melody, okay? And that's basically just turning phrasing into something that you feel in your body even while you're comping. The cool thing about this for Scott was he was like, okay, cool. So I can do it on one tune. And I'm like, no, no, no. Watch this. And we learned another tune. It took us like 15 minutes to learn another tune with this method. And boom, it was internalized. You could play it forever, right? That's the magic of focusing on phrasing and release points for your comping, okay? So you're going to be keeping the form, but what you're going to find is that you start to feel like a play along track, right? Like you're just backing up the band and they're doing stuff and you're aware that they're doing stuff, but you don't know how to interact with the band, okay? So that's what we need to focus on next. We need to focus on interaction. Okay. Interaction in jazz music is not random. And also, you shouldn't listen to it and be overwhelmed. There's kind of normal ways. It's like a conversation. When someone asks a question, you answer, right? When someone tells a joke, you laugh, right? And you just need to learn these rules and get them into your muscle memory so that it's second nature, okay? The way that we do this is we do something we call with and against, okay? So, with and against refers to how you're interacting with the soloist, okay? If you're playing with the soloist, it means you're kind of trying to play with the same phrasing they are. Okay. So I always do this in Miles Davis Doxy solo because it's just so clear. But if I'm going to play with him, I'm going to try to match his phrasing. Okay. So ba 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 bo bo do ba di ba da boo ya chu di wa ba ba di va do de da. Okay. Now, everybody, when they hear me do that, they're like, well, Jameson, you memorized that solo, so of course you can comp with him. Here's the thing. Jazz is like a conversation where both people are talking at the same time. So you don't need to respond perfectly. You just kind of need to like match their energy. Just like in a real conversation. If you're trying to think about how to say the right thing every time, you're going to come off really awkward. But if you're just like hanging out with the other person, enjoying the energy, you're on the same general wavelength, it's going to go well. So that sounds something like this. Right? You can see I'm like generally in the same zone, but you need to get used to listening like that and kind of following people's energy. And then you need to learn against. Against tends to be a lot easier for people. You just wait till they stop playing and then play. Right? You get the idea. Now, the thing with that one I find is everybody's too hesitant. You're afraid you're going to step on their toes. You jump in at the last second because you don't want to get in the way. You need to start being more confident, and you need to know that you have something valuable to contribute to the music, and that when you comp for people, they play better. And that's what's going to make people want to play with you more, and that's what's going to make you feel comfortable going to a jam session. All right? So if you have those four things, feel, vocabulary, form, and interaction, you're going to be confident comping. If you don't know how to do those things, it's okay. That's probably why you're here. You're working on that. But that is something I help my students with at the jazz school. I would love to help you with it if you're really dedicated. Click the link in the description to apply for the jazz school. I'll help you out. Okay, now that you are comfortable soloing and comping, you are going to totally shred over every single tune that you know. And that's the thing, is you have to know enough tunes now to go to these jam sessions, okay? So there's several things you're gonna need to learn to feel comfortable with your tunes, okay? So recently I was working with one of my students. His name is Jack, very talented young drummer here in Seattle, getting ready for college applications. And we were working on Blues for Alice by Charlie Parker, okay? And when we were learning this tune, I was like, okay, cool. Do you know the tune? And he's like, I think so. And then he played a solo over it, got a little off. It's okay. We worked on it. He fixed it. But I asked him, all right, let's learn this tune. Do you know the melody, right? And how do you know the melody of a song? Can you sing it, okay? Can you replicate it in your head when nobody's looking? And none of this like, hey, will you give me the first couple bars of that, right? If you imagine if you're at a jam session, hey, will you give me the first couple bars of that? You don't really know that tune. You need to be able to sing it off the top of your head when nobody's looking without even thinking, boom. That's how you know you really know a melody. And a lot of times that's more than enough to not get lost in the form on a tune, okay? If you're still getting lost when you learn the melody, you need to go through and learn the phrasing, okay? So Blues for Alice, it's 12-bar blues. If we break it up into 3 chunks of 4, it's a lot easier to get through the form, and we don't have to sing the whole melody when we're soloing, okay? This is also where the melody mapping part comes in, right? If I understand the phrasing of Drift In or Blues for Alice, boom, I get through it a lot easier. And then the last part is, let's say you're still getting lost. Some tunes are just hard like that. Stablemates, crazy form, right? If you're still getting lost, you just need to learn the chord changes. You need to learn the harmony of it, okay? And no, you don't need to be Jacob Collier for this. You don't need to be a harmonic genius, right? You just need to have enough of a grasp to where you hear it in the back of your head, right? And most of the time, all you have to do for that is just get out your keyboard or the keyboard app on your phone and play the bass notes of the song, right? So if the chord change says B flat 7, just play B flat, right? If it says E flat minor 7 flat 5, just play E flat and go through it real slow. Do it with the recording, slow it down if you have to. But what you find most of the time, if you do that and then you go to like solo over it, like you put on the changes on iReal Pro or an app like that, then when you solo, you can just kind of feel your way through the changes. A lot of times it's abstract. You don't even know what's happening, but that makes you really relax because it has this linear thing to where you can kind of feel it. And what happens with this, and this is what happened with my boy Jack, he did these things. He's great, works really hard, great guy. When he did these things, when he went to solo on it, he didn't even have to think about any of that. It just built this framework for him to where he could just relax and just play. And I gotta tell you, man, he can crush blues for Alice. I've heard him do it a bunch of times, right? And that's really how you want to learn tunes. You want to learn tunes so well that when you show up on the bandstand, you can just play. Because anything besides that, you're stressing, right? You're working hard. You're like, I hope I don't get lost, right? That's not going to be your best performance. Your best performance is when you've done all this work preparing yourself and then you can just play and it's easy, okay? So if you struggle with knowing what tunes to learn or how to do any of these steps, learning the melody, getting the phrasing, getting the harmony, that is what I help my students with. I would love to help you if you're super dedicated. Click the link in the description to apply to some mentorship. Now, if you do these things, you learn soloing and comping and you know all the tunes, that's like all the technical stuff. And I think most teachers would just stop there. But what I've found is I've prepared my students for that. And what happens, and this happens to me too, is they get on the stage and they go, Janison, I was nervous, or my ideas didn't come out like I thought they would, right? If this is happening to you, it's not any of this mechanical stuff. It's actually that you need to focus on the right vibes and the right mindsets and the right philosophies that are going to make you play your best when you do get on stage, okay? So the first thing that's going to happen to you a lot of the times is you're going to be thinking too fast when you get on stage, okay? One of my students, Corey, was going through this recently. Corey is an absolute killer. He's playing professionally out in San Antonio, like just a total stud, can play his butt off. But he has this thing sometimes where when he gets on stage, he starts thinking a little bit fast. And it feels like this. All good ideas, all executed well in time, but it just feels a little anxious. And it would like affect him a little bit more, okay? So I've seen him play super, super relaxed. I know he's capable of it. So what I gave him is something we call the dad dance, okay? And what it is it's just like this. So instead of thinking, bum, 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 dum, 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 we think like this. Uh, uh, And it's like a dad would dance at a wedding. It's like a little awkward, but it's this kind of halftime relaxed vibe, right? Instead of thinking really fast, you think slower and your beats will feel better. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Because you're thinking bigger picture, you're more zoomed out, and that gets you closer to a state of flow. You can take this even further. You could do it like double halftime. But the reason that this works so well is it's a physical hook in your body that you can feel that gets you to feel a different way emotionally in the moment so that you can actually be in control of your emotions. And then when you perform, you can perform at your best. The other thing that might happen to you is you might just get plain nervous. And what most of my students say is this feels like, hey, I can play this really good in my practice room when I've been warmed up for half an hour. And when I get up on stage, there's no time to warm up. The kit feels a little weird. I'm just nervous. My heart is pumping and nothing I practiced came out. I feel this, man. Yeah, everybody goes through this. The way to get through this is, well, I gotta tell you a hard truth first. You are not the drummer that you are when you're in this practice room and you're warmed up and you're sounding incredible. That's not who you are. Who you are is who you are when you're on stage and you're nervous, because that's what people hear. That's what people see in the performance. So, that warmed up drummer, that's certainly a part of you. That's part of your potential. But we really want to see to what level we can get your actual performance when it comes to crunch time, right? Like a football player. If they're really good in practice, but then they get nervous and miss every throw, they're not going to be on the team for very long, right? So the trick for this, being nervous, is you need to get nervous more often. You can't stay safe. You can't sit in your practice room trying to get everything perfect. You need to go to situations that make you nervous, like having a teacher, somebody who you care about their opinion of how you play, and you show up and you get a little nervous and it puts you in that zone and you push through it and you sound better. Or you need to have a community of other drummers that you get on with, that you're working on things with, and you want them to think that you play good. Nothing wrong with that, right? And when you play things for them, they know if you did it right, right? You got to have that, or else you're going to lose your edge. You're not going to be able to perform when the moment comes. And the best way, of course, is just to go to jam sessions regularly so that you have that pressure, you get used to performing, and you're a performer at heart, okay? The other thing that you're going to feel that's going to mess up your performance, and it's really, kind of like the root cause of all these symptoms, is just thinking too much about yourself, right? We all, when we go to perform, we think that everybody is only thinking about our ride cymbal beat or this paradiddle lick that we practice or how we sound or if our ideas are coming out. But they're not, man. They're thinking about what they're playing and they're thinking about what everybody else thinks of them, right? And so the trick here is to flip it. I think it was Jeff Hamilton that said that, thinking of, oh, I hope I don't make a mistake is really selfish because you're thinking about yourself. What's less selfish, what gets you out of that, is thinking about how the other players sound, right? Because if you're thinking how the other players sound, you're going to be thinking, how can I make them sound better? What can I do to raise them up? And then it takes the pressure off of you and it makes it about what it's really about, which is the people that you're playing with, doing the thing you love, and the music that you guys are trying to create together. That's far above any of our individual selves, okay? And so if you do these things, you're used to getting nervous, you know how to slow down your thinking, and you know how to think of others instead of just thinking of yourself when you're performing, then you're going to get this ethos of the hang. That's what jazz is all about. It's just this. I love jazz. You love jazz. It's great when we do it together. That's why we all want to go to jam sessions, to feel that, to feel this vibe, this hang, right? And that's how you're going to perform your best on a consistent basis year over year. Not get ready just for your first jam session, but for a long career of playing jazz music, okay? Of course, this is something that takes practice and repetition, just like all of the mechanical stuff. So if you want help with that, that is what I help my students with at the jazz school. You know how to apply. So if you do all this, you will be able to solo confidently in any situation. You'll be able to comp and sound authentic while making the other musicians sound really good because you're a supportive, accompanying musician. And you'll know all the tunes that you need to feel totally confident, go into the jam session, nothing's going to get called on you that will have you stumped. And you're going to have the right vibes. You're going to be relaxed. You're going to be confident enough to get out there, play your best, and actually enjoy it instead of beating yourself up thinking that you're not good enough. And that's when you are truly jam session ready. If you made it this far, this is the kind of stuff that I work on with my students at the jazz school. You're probably somebody who's really dedicated and really interested in this, and I would love to help you. If you're serious, you're ready to put in the work. Click the link in the description to reach out, get some more information, and book a call with me. We'll have a short chat to see if it's a good fit. I'll see you on the other side.